So, theologically speaking,
hello and welcome to Theologically Speaking. This is a very special bonus episode between seasons 2 and 3 for a nice palate cleanse. Of course, Father Davis is with us today, but I'm also joined by Jeffrey Clark Tosca and Ed Tosca, who is the Rector's Warden at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood, because we are going to be talking about church in the time of COVID. We're going to be talking all about their experiences in the last year trying to make church work while we are stuck in our homes, stuck indoors, and, for lack of a better term, forbidden from having church in a church building. So, hello, fellas.
Good afternoon.
That's Ed Tosca and
Hi there.
Jeffrey Clark Tosca, and of course, you know this voice.
good afternoon.
So, okay, where do we begin? Where should we begin? Like, thinking about where it all started, I was just at lunch a minute ago with a fellow parishioner, and we were talking about it. March 15th is the day the world shut down. March 15th was the day that the government and all entities, the bodies that choose what our life is all about, the diocese, everybody said, we're going into our homes, give us 2 weeks, which now we know that it's been almost a year and a half. So what was the first thing that happened in with the clergy and with the rector's warden, who sort of executes the things that needs to happen within the church? What was the first thing that happened then?
I think one of the first things I remember was the Vatican closing down and the Pope not saying Mass. And suddenly it dawned on me that this was far more serious than just an influenza outbreak. And I rang the bishop and I said to him, this is serious. The Vatican has closed down. And the bishop at first said, oh, well, we're not northern Italy. We don't need to worry quite so. And then the bishop realized, no, this is big. So that's when we decided to close down.
And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we ever missed a Sunday. We never missed a Sunday of doing something, did we?
No, we stayed right on our rhythm, and we are so lucky that we already had a very skeletal live stream set up going at the time, and many thanks to those people who had set that up in the past, and many things were on YouTube. So we had kind of opened the door to live streaming. The first thing I remember is being in the church alone with Father and a cell phone. And
well, and that was how we've always done some type of live stream with somebody, but looking back, it was, again, I was at lunch with the parishioner, and I'm like, what we didn't know back then is actually hilarious now, because before COVID, we were doing live stream with a cell phone at the back of the church, relying only on the ambient sounds from the speakers in the church. That was the only source of sound for the live streams. And every church, my family's churches back in Alabama, everybody was doing live stream on Facebook Live and the like. But we have a reputation now. I'll just skip to the bottom line, the finish line. We have a reputation of being one of the best live streams in America right now. So what was it that changed, and when did it change, and when did we try to do more? Like, we did it very quickly.
Actually, the first thing I remember was we didn't actually know what was going on at home. Ed and I didn't. And we actually saw a notification online on Facebook that Father was live streaming a Mass. It was a daily Mass. I'll never forget it. And he was in the St. Damien Chapel doing it himself.
Right.
He had a cell phone on a tripod, and he put it up there, and he was talking to the camera, and then he had to go get vested, and then he came back, and he did the entire Mass himself, and talked to the audience. And that's when I turned to Ed and said, we can do better. Like, we need to do this. We need to get over there and make this happen.
so then Jeff and I did join Father, and using the cell phone and just the mic on the cell phone. And the very first thing that we heard from our parishioners was that we can't hear. The sound's not good. And that's partially because of the way our church is built. It's Gothic, and the echo, it just wasn't conducive to that.
I see, and just this is a moment of pride for me being a member of St. Thomas, because our parishioners are opinionated and we don't like not having it our way. So that's the necessity that bred innovation in our church, was our parishioners had something to say about it, as we always do.
Right. And we certainly didn't take it wrong. We took it as, okay, how can we make the sound better? And Jeff started doing the research online for this microphone, and then we were tethered. We had Father tethered for a few months on a
the 180s.
Was attached to the long wire and couldn't do my 360 degrees.
That's right.
Pray, my brothers and sisters.
180s.
It had to be 180 and
That's
then
right.
turn back. Yeah.
like,
So, I think a lot of churches did figure it out. They figured out how to make the sound good enough for everybody to hear it, and make the visuals good enough for everybody to see it. We're only going to be here temporary. That's good enough. Was it you, Jeff, that was like, we can do better. Like, we can make it better quality? Because, we had good quality in the beginning. Just like every other church. It's like we got the prayers to the people. We got the mass to the people. And that's what all churches across America have been doing, but we did something different. And I want to know, was it you that was like, we can do better? There's more technology out there.
We sensed that it was not just our parishioners online, and we saw where people were really hungry for the liturgy. Like Father just mentioned, everything shut down. So all of a sudden, this constant stream of liturgy people were used to either seeing on TV or going to their church was cut off, and it's kind of like cutting off someone's air. So we knew we had people online who needed to hear. They weren't necessarily, had never come to St. Thomas at all. And that's when I knew we needed to get something to at least allow them to hear what he was saying. And then it became people kept saying this is an intimate experience. I said, well, if it's intimate, you need to be able to hear and then be able to see better. And that was really the driving force. We need to be able to see and hear as if we're there.
Well, and at what point, because I know that in the beginning we were all sort of, I don't know, like camping, like spiritual camping. We were watching these videos online, and then Zoom, I think whoever invented Zoom needs a Nobel Peace Prize at this point, because Zoom changed everything for COVID. We started doing coffee hour Zooms, and we were still sort of huddled together as parishioners. But then at some point we started seeing people we didn't know in the viewer list. When did you realize that there were people out there? Because that really is something we're going to get into very deeply, is the people we don't know personally. When did you start realizing, how early on, like on the calendar, when did you see those people pop up?
well, let me back up just a bit. So the first thing we did, maybe for about a couple of weeks, is we were in our St. Damien chapel. And we thought we were okay, just the three of us in there doing some filming. And then the bishop kind of reached out to us and said, yeah, your church really needs to be closed. That includes you. So next thing I know, we're in the rectory dining room with Father and kind of building a new altar inside of the dining room. And that's when we started seeing the numbers and people's names that we didn't recognize off the bat. And I think it was near Easter time when we did our Saturday evening Latin Mass, where we had nearly 2,000 Facebook views. That caught the attention of the National Episcopalian News Service, and they actually reached out to us, and that's how we...
I remember that. You, Father, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here saying this. You very quickly, because I forgot about that part. I forgot about doing it here in the dining room. For how long did y'all do it in the dining room before we were able to kind of go back into church? It was a good 4 or 5 months.
5 months, yeah.
Well, we were in your dining room, and you have lovely pieces, as does St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood. But then there were two camps of people. There were the is this Liberace's dining room or is this Walter Mercado's dining room?
Those are the two camps. It's a choice between Liberace and Walter Mercado. Well, it's a combination of both, really. My dining room. It's got some lovely antiques in it and some more modern pieces as well. But lots of candles. And we had all the candles lit.
In fact, we joke that we felt a lot of people were watching us, not necessarily for the mass of the liturgy, but just to see if we're going to catch the place on fire.
Yes, were the curtains going to catch fire? Oh, and we had to put up huge, great blackout curtains because the sun coming through the dining room window was silhouetting and couldn't see what was going on, really. So, yeah.
Well, and I guess it's you, or is it? I would assume it's you, Jeff, that every time an issue would arise, you would set about studying and find a solution, rather than just find something over at home, like a blanket to drape over something or this or that. It was you who would Google things and be like, what can we do to fix this problem? And you kind of pinball machined your way into the way to get this down to a science, right?
If only people could see behind the scenes. So we had different colored note cards behind the scenes when Father was here in the rectory, and it was get ready, I think go, stop, offline, something like that. And they're all different colors, meaning like red, green, go, stop type of thing, because that was the only hand signals we had. There was no mute button, and it was literally the chords with the Louis trying not to trip over them.
Yes.
and disconnect everything, basically.
Well, and I want to give a little context. Your job, Ed, you are the rector's warden. So it is your job to make what needs to happen that comes from the rector, make it happen, sort of. Is that a pretty accurate description?
More or less. I consider the position to be kind of a liaison between the rector and the parishioners. Also, to kind of cultivate the community of the church itself in more of a social setting.
Well, I just want to give context to people who might have some ambiguity as to why it was the two of you here. There's several reasons. You're the rector's warden, so you're the liaison between the rector and the parishioners. And Jeff, you are the sacristan. So all this Walter Mercado, Liberace stuff that had to come in to be on camera, that's your job. Take care of the stuff. But then also, you two are the two parishioners who live closest geographically to the church. So that's how you kind of got to this point where it was the two of you who was on this trip with Father Davis and little Louis throughout the whole thing.
Correct. And it was just a natural progression that it was going to be us.
Yeah. So we're in the church. We're in the dining room here in the house. You've got your equipment here. You're doing your thing, and it was. And I remember when I don't remember if it was something you said on camera, Father, or did we talk? Because we did Digital Discipleship Guild. Like we sort of created this group because you, me, Jeff, and then Jeffrey Parola, and I think Anthony and Randy. There's several of us on this group that was just like, let's figure this out. Let's see what happens. I can't remember if you said it or if we talked about it, but you were like, I'm having trouble getting my words across because there's a delay, there's this or that. There was all these little issues that we found ways to tweak and figure it out. But eventually you went and you settled into a nice rhythm here in the dining room.
It was very difficult at first because as a priest celebrating Mass, one is used to having a congregation immediately present and seeing people and faces and gestures and people's body language. But that was all taken away suddenly. And it was very difficult, in fact, to celebrate Mass on my own. And some people have theological issues about that. I have no problems with that because I believe that, anyone can come to the Mass, the door's open. But at that time, of course, we had to say Mass without a congregation.
Well, isn't that the thing that people who had theological issues with you doing it alone, you either did it alone on camera or you didn't do it at all.
Right. And I was determined not to give up saying Mass. I mean, for me, that's essential. It's the bread and butter of the day.
And
saying
then
Mass.
another concept in that is in the Mass, the liturgy flows. Well, the way that we had to do it to make it work online is we would literally stop, and then our wonderful musical director, Dr. Parola, would insert himself or insert. So it wasn't necessarily as smooth as a regular Mass. There would be breaks and
Right.
stops, and then we'd start again.
Well, and you eventually figured it out, but I want to stop and just kind of sit in the space of those 4 months you did it in the dining room, and I'm going to just turn the microphone over to the three of you because I want to hear the early day stories. There's tons of stories. You told me some of them. I want to hear more. So,
Father, do you remember what I told you when we first came into the rectory? How I felt, how brave you were to do this.
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Because it suddenly hit me when I saw you struggling to look at the camera, struggling to know where to look. Like you said, like there's no congregation, that you continue to do it just as you would have done it in the church with the congregation.
Yes.
And that meant I just felt you were extremely brave.
Well, thank you. That was a moment when I think you said, envisage someone at the other end of the camera. And I have to say, I thought of my friend James Fraser and how much the daily Mass means to Jimmy. And that's what gave me kind of some impetus and focus to carry on. Remembering that that great fan of Walter Mercado, if not Walter Mercado impersonator himself, Jimmy Fraser, you know? I mean, he's priceless. He really is.
And to kind of leap off of that, it was pretty quick that we were able to realize that we were still reaching our parishioners. We were still in a sense of community, and that the response was good. It was positive. So why not keep going? Why not pushing? And also at this time, the pandemic is getting worse. And they're talking about, don't go outside, don't do this. So the three of us had a really good conversation about, are we going to be a COVID bubble, the three of us? Yeah. And yes, we are. So let's stay together. And if anytime someone has to go out, we discuss it. Are you comfortable? And that's how it was just very natural that we kept going.
Yeah.
We also, because we didn't know what was going to come with COVID, we had to kind of keep reinventing and look ahead. For instance, the holidays. When the holidays started coming up, it started in March. So then you get into April, and then you get into May, and you started getting into the Easter season. So we immediately looked up, I remember one night, and said, oh, wow, Easter's coming. What do we do?
Yeah.
So we had to keep reinventing. And then we're like, okay, we're going to bring, for Palm Sunday, we're going to bring palms into the rectory.
Yep.
For Easter, we're going to bring the Paschal candle into the rectory.
And set fire to the ceiling.
That's right.
Okay, I guess I better fill in what happened there.
Right.
Yes, we did almost one time catch the place on fire. If you're familiar with Paschal candles, they're rather tall.
Very tall.
And even though the rectory has lovely high ceilings, they're not quite that high. And then if you put fresh oil in the Paschal candle and then light it, the about 4-inch flame that jumps off the top.
And all things hot go up, not down.
Yes, so
Now you tell me.
yes, we've had several laughs, especially thinking back to here in the rectory. One of my favorite stories that happened here was, so my position when Father's doing the Mass and Jeff is filming was I was kind of running everything socially online and making sure everything was okay and kind of keeping contact with everybody during the Mass. And like I mentioned, we do a Latin Mass on Saturday evenings. Well, sometimes when you type in Latin, autocorrect takes over. Yes. And something happened and I had to rush out of the dining room and I was literally bent over laughing. And Jeff and Father got so concerned because they didn't know what happened. And then I came back in and informed Jeff, and then Jeff kind of lost it and Father couldn't figure out what was going on. But this one probably takes the cake. A dear, dear friend and parishioner of ours, Ruth, typed in the comments section secula seculorum, which in Latin means forever and ever. Well, unfortunately, autocorrect took over and it became Dracula Draculorum. And I literally just had to leave the room. And then she tried to correct it again, and it came back Dracula again. It just went on and on.
Dracula.
And if you know Ruth, it just
Yeah. Ruth is not a vampire. I have to add that immediately. We, however, are descended from long lines of werewolves and vampires, and the full moon brings out the worst in us.
I mean, that's the nature of it. And I remember that in the beginning we did see some of the hiccups of doing it. And like there was never any sort of judgment from the part of the parishioners. We were just so grateful that we were still able to do it. And I was surprised how natural it did feel to watch church online and to hear that liturgy. And that's just a testament to the Episcopal Anglican liturgy, is that, and that's the whole point of having written prayers, that they are the same, no matter what. And I was very shocked that it's true. We found that out. We got the opportunity to test that theory, and it was true.
it's really, I don't want to use the word pride. It's more humbled that we did not miss a mass in a year and a half. 4 times a week, every week, we did it. We did it no matter what was going on, cold, rain, heat, the rectory, back in the church. We kept the rhythm, and we're humbled and very proud about that.
That says something about, I think, about the love of God as well, that no matter what mood we're in, if we're kind of up and happy and bouncy, or if we're down and low and sad, there's a consistency about God's love and God's grace that persists through our lives. And the liturgy expresses that. It doesn't matter where or how we're feeling or where we may be, we're still drawn into that worship of Almighty God.
And it's interesting. I think we were probably in the rectory, like we said, maybe 4 or 5 months. And the COVID numbers started to get better, and our bishop said, you can go back into the church to live stream. And that was like the breath of fresh air that everybody needed, because people missed physically seeing the inside of our church. And then once we could get back in there, and we started with the filming and the better microphones and just showing the pictures of inside, I think that even brought more comfort to everyone.
Well, and that's something that with evolving situations brings on new challenges, because doing it at a dinner table in a carpeted home where you have carpets and smaller spaces, you have a sound, and the camera is close, you have the sound, you've made it work. And now you have to go into a cathedral-like structure with stone floors and large spaces. What was that like?
Stressful. It was, on my side, it was very stressful. We had, let me back up. It was my own challenge to continually improve the video quality and audio quality, because one of the reasons is because I wanted to challenge myself to keep myself going. And that was, to me, that's how I kept going. That's what helped me with my stress and my fatigue, was always finding the next best thing for us to help it keep going. But you're right, going into the larger building, suddenly with a camcorder instead of a cell phone, we now migrated to a camcorder. The camcorder microphone is terrible. So how do you pick up the sound? How do you transmit it to online? Because now it's a camcorder. It's no longer a cell phone connected to Facebook.
Yeah. Well, and 2, I had the opportunity to see your setup in person at the height of when you finally did get all the accoutrement to get it going. And to be frank, it was just not practical for when people were to come back, because you were set up in between where the choir sits. So that blocked the entire aisle. There was no way you could do that. But before we get to that point, I want to talk about our online viewership. I want to go into that a little more because we had mentioned that we started noticing that there were people we didn't know watching, but then it got beyond people we didn't know. It got to people's generosity and their eagerness to give to this church, to give to this cause, and then go into a little bit about when people started getting nervous that we were going to go away because things were evolving with COVID.
Right. I guess this would be definitely in my department to speak about. So we did 4 masses a week, 2 during the week on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, a Saturday evening Latin Mass, and our Sunday High Mass in the morning. During normal times before COVID, during our weekday masses, we would have maybe 10, 12, 15 people in the congregation. The Latin Mass would maybe have 25 up to 50, depending on if there were special singers or something. And our Sunday morning masses would be anywhere from maybe 100 to 125 live. So the bishop asked us to start keeping track of the views on Facebook, because at that time we were really only on Facebook. And a view was if someone had watched at least for 3 seconds.
Can I stop you there for a second? Mm-hmm. Like, that's something I don't know about. As far as the bishop asking you to do, what was his reasoning to know this stuff? Like, what was going on for him? I guess because we in a church we started noticing. Well, there's people here that they don't go to us, but they're showing up every week. What was happening on the bishop's end? As far as that happens, as that goes, you know what I mean?
As you said, he started noticing that people were watching, not only us, but all the other parishes that were trying to dip into the online new life. And he was very curious, and he was extremely supportive and basically just said, keep going, keep trying, keep trying.
I think because the reason that struck me is because we are, I guess the assumption is the bishop's job is to keep the churches going and just keep them going however they have to keep going. And our job is to do what we do, sort of, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's fun that we're noticing it, but I don't know any of the perspective of the bishop as far as like, what was his reaction to the way we were doing things and that kind of thing.
I think the bishop obviously from the very beginning was concerned about the welfare and well-being and the health of all the Episcopalians, well, and of everyone who lives in the 6 counties of Los Angeles in this area. And he was very concerned about the spread of the virus. And at that time, we didn't know. Was it through touch of surfaces? Was it through, the chalice, or just receiving the host at Mass? What was spreading this virus? And it was slowly dawning on us that breath and singing were 2 major issues that we had to confront as well. And that's partly why we did so much music separate from the liturgies that we did on a Sunday. A great deal of merchandise was purchased, crosses and icons and computers and screens for computers, all of those different things. A lot of people invested time and energy and money in what we were doing, and I will forever be grateful for the wonderful camaraderie and the spirit that it inspired. Yeah,
I think we will too, and we'll look back upon this time with not sadness or not, but a lot of laughs, a lot of innovation, and kind of jumping on what Father was saying, the camaraderie, and it's really important that he knows coming from our end that he never said no. We would say, let's try this, let's move here, let's do that. And Father was like, okay, let's try it. And we just pushed on, which caused, maybe that's not the reason it caused, but our numbers jumped significantly. Our weekday masses, we now have over 125 to 150 viewers. Our Sunday
Live, right as it starts.
just about when it's done.
Yeah.
Like, so people kind of watch on their own, and we watch the numbers creep up during the week, per se. Our Latin Mass on Saturday evening gets 500 viewers sometimes, and then our High Mass on a Sunday.
How does our response, because I just want to kind of sit in the diocese for a moment, how does our response to COVID and how we manage to carry on, how does it compare to other churches just in the Los Angeles area? Not really, I mean, I guess in the whole diocese, but like in our area and in under our bishops, how does it compare?
Some churches went to their strong points. So some parishes could do Bible studies immediately and do them very, very well through Zoom and that kind of thing. We're a liturgical Anglo-Catholic parish, so it's very important for us that the sacraments continue to be celebrated even in the most dire of circumstances, and that's what we did. But other churches did Bible studies and Taizé and Compline and services of devotion. And sometimes they'd be regular on Wednesday evenings, for example. There'd always be something. But some parishes, they just couldn't cope. They couldn't sustain the kind of energy that it is necessary to celebrate the sacraments.
Well, and I want to ask you, Father, because it would have been understandable if you had picked the most important, maybe a midweek service and a high mass, and just said, that's what we're going to do. That's going to be what we need to keep going. But that's not what you did. You did service after service after service to the point where our in-person non-COVID calendar was pretty much represented digitally. And what was your thinking behind that?
Tiredness, I remember. But Holy Week was a big challenge, and I spoke to clergy all over the country. I rang up friends and wanted to know what they were doing, and some of them were just doing nothing at all. Some were doing the whole 9 yards, as much as they could, and we decided we would do.
I just want to say that to remind everybody that we closed on March 15th. The world shut down, and it was not a couple of weeks after that we were going into Holy Week. It was very quickly after we were told to shut the lights off that you had to decide what we were going to do in Holy Week. So it wasn't like you had months to prepare and then talk to your friends and decide what we're going to do. You had to figure this out in a matter of a couple of weeks.
Right, yeah. And as you probably are aware, the Holy Week liturgies in and of themselves are long, complex and detailed. And on top of that, we needed addresses, sermons, homilies, and meditations. And those were... Fortunately, the bishop is very inspiring, and in conversations with him and in reading lots of books and getting some of the latest publications out, I was able to pull together some meditations and some sermons. Not my best, but they were okay for the time.
We could debate you on that, but we'll save that for another time. Also, this is about the time, if I remember, and Jeff, I think this would be great for you to speak on just a bit. Other parishes started reaching out to us with questions and how are you doing? What do we need? Please help us.
I think every parish did the best of their means, and as anybody knows who goes through this, live streaming is not cheap, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of coordination. And some parishes didn't have the know-how, the money, just basic money, but also they just didn't really know what to do. So we had other parishes reach out, and especially around the sound, that is the trickiest thing to get down when you're live streaming. How do you capture the sound the way that you're capturing it?
Well, and two, the three of you were doing it from the dining room in the rectory, and then you moved to the church. But then at the height, when it kind of became the biggest it was going to become before we had to start innovating on the way we did it. When it finally reached its full capacity of what it could be, it wasn't just the three of you. It was the three of you in the church, and then Jeffrey Parola, Dr. Jeffrey Parola, our choir director and organist, and then you three were organizing readers because there's 1 to 2 readers for every mass, and then Jeffrey Parola was organizing singers for the psalms and the like, and so it got to be I guess that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 people being involved at one time, and that is more than what most churches were doing. Most churches were not because that's a big chunk to take on. That's a big thing to tackle. And Jeff, you were putting it together. You and Jeffrey Parola was putting it together, and there was a lot of moving parts. And that's something I want to get to in a second. How you saw how big this had become. You felt the need to find an easier way to get it done. But at the height of that, speak on that when we had singers, an organist, and readers, and then all of you behind the scenes too.
One thing we had to make a really big decision on is if we were going to live stream or pre-record. So some parishes decided to pre-record, which is a heck of a lot easier because you can do it during the week and you put it all together, piece it all together, and hit play, basically, on a Sunday.
So I want to go into the two sides, not two sides. I mean, I guess I think two sides, do it or don't do it. But go into more nuance of what that discussion was like. Between
live streaming and pre-record?
Yeah.
We felt that it was just a more intimate experience to do live stream because if we messed up, we wanted people to see that we're human. We're trying. We're here. We're not trying to do a beautiful show. This is us putting, presenting the liturgy for you in real time with you. It was with people instead of it being behind the scenes.
There's no chance to edit then,
Correct.
Really, in a way.
Yeah.
We have to think ahead, plan ahead, plan what we're about to say, what we're about to do, the positioning of where everyone is.
Right.
And this is something that people won't know, is that I sleep not terribly well sometimes, and Sunday mornings are sometimes the most difficult time for me to wake up. And every Sunday morning I would get a phone call at 7 a.m. to ensure that I was awake and out of bed from Ed Tosca himself. And it's a tradition now that's carried on.
Well, maybe it's not a phone call, but at least is maybe a snarky text or something like that.
So is that for me to infer that you were in the camp that was like, let's just do it sometime midweek, midday?
No. I was very happy to do it live. For me, that is crucial.
And another kind of concept about the live is that, we have this rather large community and it's growing. And if we would tape something on Wednesday, well, things are going to happen before Sunday. People want to be added to the prayer list. There may be a death. There may be this. So we really decided to just keep it live so we could be exactly in the moment.
That is one humble opinion, and it's not more right, more wrong, more whatever. It's just the opinion that I hold. I've been pretty forthright on this podcast and my personal podcast that I do elsewhere. My dad passed away in September, and then in December, I had a very, very close family member who passed away of COVID. My dad was not COVID, but to know that you were saying these words in real time, praying for my family, it meant all the world. And I knew in my heart that it meant a lot to my family to hear our names read in the prayers, but it meant so much more to know that I was able to hear it as you were saying it.
Some of you may know, a couple of years ago, I had cancer and I had to have chemotherapy and radiation therapy at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. And it was one of the things in my worst moments that kept me going, was knowing that there's a community of people praying for me. That just gave me hope and gave me a light at the end of a dark tunnel. And now I've pulled through and I'm fine. And it's my privilege to pray for you, for the listener, or the person who's watching at home or in hospital. And we know many people who are in difficult situations. And also COVID's brought out people who would never have come into contact with church or with the message of the gospel or with the grace of Christ. But there are people now who are able to get that part of the jigsaw puzzle, and that's fitting into place.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, Father, because it's so easy to talk about the numbers so big, so many. But one thing that the three of us often said to each other, especially at the beginning, and we've kept it throughout, is we literally say sometimes at the end of the Mass, if just one person hears this, then what we're doing is worth it. And that brings up another story. It was maybe late spring, early summer of last year, and out of the blue, we got a comment from someone in Houston, and they had just were dealing with a horrible hurricane, and she's I can't remember her last name. Her first name was Cecilia. And she's like, thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to this all day. Thank you for praying. Thank you. And that's what we focused on. If just one person is,
And I want to touch on that, because that around that time was also around the time that we had been doing Mass online in the church with all the moving parts. Or Jeffrey was in his home playing the piano, and then we had people singing in their home, and then we had readers in their home. And that was at the height of when Mass became what it was online. And then we started getting messages from these people talking about how much it meant to them, people from all over the world. And so simultaneously, because I work closely with Jeff, you on multiple projects. You are the producer on this podcast, but also you and I are on a production team making a documentary about our church, and we work. And I'm on the Altar Guild, and you're the sacristan. So we work a lot together. So you had been talking to me as a friend and as a fellow parishioner of like, things are moving with COVID, and it's becoming clear that we're not going to be able to stop this, because we're hearing from people in Houston, we're hearing from people all over the world. They want to keep watching this, and at some point, we're going to go back into the church, and there's going to be parishioners in the seats. We're going to sing out loud, sing proud, and have a full church experience again. But we have enough of a number watching us online. We cannot turn our backs on them now. So what was your perspective as sort of the technical guy? Because I remember when you started looking forward, how are we going to move forward? Because the current system isn't working, because you had platforms and lights and laptops and a full video village in the church, which in Hollywood is perfect, but in a liturgy, it's not. So what was your mindset when we started thinking about what's the future of online streaming?
I knew we had to maintain or improve video quality, audio quality, but also have everything out of the way as much as possible. You're right. We had folding tables. We had cords everywhere, laptops. I mean, it just wasn't doable to have people in. And I was seeing the numbers starting to come down, and I knew that eventually we would open those doors. And what I wanted people in person to experience the same that they had before, online, the same or better. And in order to do that, we had to have equipment that allowed us to do that and have it tucked out of the way, basically.
Yeah, I remember the digital discipleship meeting we had when we were talking. You were like, hey, I want to bring this to you guys. Let's start thinking about this. And my piece that I brought, it was like, listen, because no offense to our church and our system and whatever, but our microphones before COVID weren't the greatest. Sometimes you cut in and out, and there were days when it just didn't work. Like you couldn't hear anything on the
system. Just failed completely on occasion, and that meant that we'd have to shout at the tops of our voices to make ourselves heard. Yeah.
Well, and that was my piece. I said, well, if we're thinking about what we want to do, I said, my thing is I want everybody in the church to hear everything that's going on equally, but also there's systems out there that allows us to to have the same sound quality in church and on video. And I would like to look at that. And you quickly said, well, that's expensive, Kyle. And I'm like, well, that's what I want. If you asked my opinion, so that's mine. If we don't have enough money for it, what's next? But that brings me to Ed. I want you to speak a little bit about some of the donations we got. I mean,
so believe it or not, I guess it was maybe mid-December. We were approached by someone online that was asking us about, are we planning to continue this after everything reopens? And of course, yes, is the answer. In some fashion, this will continue. And they basically said, well, I will make a significant donation to make sure that this happens. And the amount was just the perfect amount of what we needed for a whole new sound system and the new cameras as well.
Well, and that's I'm glad you said mid-December, because that's something I want listeners to think about. And I should have said this at the top of the show. As we say the dates, remember COVID. Remember what the world was going through at COVID. Mid-December, we started hearing about the vaccine. So that's when all of our brains shifted. We're like, we're turning a corner here.
Exactly.
And that's when people were like, I can't lose you. I mean, and that was interesting to hear that, like, because Jeff and I, along with the other members of the digital discipleship team, were talking about what can we do, because we got to do something. And right then, someone said, I can't lose you. I'm going to make a donation. I mean, Father, you can speak to this. That feels to me like the Holy Spirit. Yes. Like, that feels like there's a through line in all of this work. It was the Holy Spirit.
It's the Holy Spirit, but the generosity of God reflected in the generosity of people. And the grace of God reflected in the grace of other people who came up with the money and were just take the money and use it for the best that you can do. And that's something that I will always remember, will always appreciate.
And not just to focus on this one angel donation, as we're calling it, because it truly is out of this world. We really never ask for anything. People just started sending in some checks, and then we realized maybe we should tap into this lightly, and we just established a PayPal link, and we would just kind of put it up, and the money really came.
With that, I just remember that we were surprised by the number of donations we were getting from online. Once we just gave a space, we were like, well, somebody wants to donate. Let's talk about giving people the opportunity to donate if they want to, put the spot there that they can click to donate. And right when we did, people started donating. And it really, I mean, the for better or worse in this country or in any country, every operation needs money to survive. Correct. And we didn't have an offering plate circulating the building, but we were able to stay afloat because people were watching.
We stayed afloat. That's the best way to say it. We certainly tightened our belt. We tightened it really tightly, but we stayed afloat, and we will forever be grateful to everyone for that.
Just being a member of the vestry and talking, because that's what vestries do. They talk money. It kept coming back around to things are tight, but then we would say, well, they're not as tight as other churches. They're not. We are staying afloat because we have a new pipeline of money that is not anything. It's just because we tried. It's because we were willing to throw what I always say, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. We were willing to do it, and it paid off. Yeah. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And then it really started. This is where Jeff really became instrumental in pushing us forward with digging into technology.
Well, at a certain point, it really did become clear that sooner or later, probably more sooner than later, we were going to go back into the building in some capacity as the vaccine rolled out, as we started to get the numbers under control, especially here in Los Angeles and in other big parts of the country and in the world. So I think that's where we're going to end this one for today. And the next episode, I want to go into what it was like to actually get back in person. And and not only that, but all of our attempts to get back in person along the way, because we have stories about garden services and you know, the varying degrees of when the numbers spiked, we had to stop the gardens and this and that. So I'd like to really stop here and then start back with a fresh perspective on what it means to get back into person, because that's a whole story within itself of just the efforts we took to make sure we could get back in person with all of our equipment, but also get back in person safely and protecting our congregation, because that is what was most important, is protecting the people and also getting them the spiritual food that they need. So until next time, we will see you next week. Theologically Speaking is a production of Church Nerds Productions. Executive producers for the show are Jeffrey Clark Tosca, Father Ian Elliott Davis, and Kyle Leon Henderson. Associate producer is Ed Tosca. Editors for the show are Kyle Leon Henderson and Jeffrey Clark Tosca. Music for this program is provided by Dr. Jeffrey Parola and the choir at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood. We would also like to give a special thanks to Louie for all the loving licks on the knee under the table while we produce this show. Visit St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood Facebook page for more information on the show, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at St. Thomas Hollywood.